Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of My Five Haunting Questions. This week we have Dave Schrader with us, and I'm super excited because, of course, you guys might know him from the Holzer Files, Devil's Perch. He's been on tons of ghost adventure programs, Paranormal State. He's been in a show with Jack Osborne and the Ghost Brothers called Fright Club. He's been in a lot of things, okay? He's just recently written his first book, so we're going to talk to him about that. And I guess he's been doing this since he was a little boy, because when he was a little boy, he lived in a haunted house, and he says he saw his grandpa and grandma's spirits, and he's seen Bigfoot, and he's seen a UFO at Lake Trout. It's a funny name, isn't it? I guess it's full of trout. I don't know. But anyway, I digress. Let's get on to it, and let's talk to Dave. Let's let him in. Hey, Dave. Thank you. Thanks for being here. I've just introed you to everybody, so I don't have to rehash all those old questions you probably get. But I do want to know one thing.
Sure.
In reading your bio, basically, I noted that, you know, you did grow up in a haunted house, and you have seen things when you were little. But not everybody grows up as a kid and says, one day I want to be a paranormal investigator. Normally it's mum and dad want you to be a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, something that'll make them, oh, my son's rich. I know I grew up wanting to be either a vet or a nurse, so I became a nurse. What kind of thing did you want to be when you grew up? I mean, or did you want to be a paranormal investigator?
Well, it's a funny blend, because when I was a child, I used to love radio, and I would call very famous local radio personalities in the Chicagoland area, and they would take my call, and I would leave my name and number, and they would call me at home. My mom would get this phone call, and all of a sudden she'd be like, Dave, Larry Lujak is on the phone for you. And he was like our number one morning guy. And I come out, and he just talked to me for an hour, and they let me pick their brains about radio and interviewing. And some of them actually invited me into studio to watch them do their craft. And I loved radio. So I believe I had been setting intentions and manifesting since I was a child. I used to practice signing my autograph, and always kind of plotted out my book sales and when I'm going to appear on TV. Never knew to what degree or what I would actually be doing it for. But as my life progressed, and I've always been kind of steeped in the supernatural, and have had weird things around me, and a mom and aunt who were very nurturing in that, and were never shying away from answering questions, and a dad who loved horror movies. So I was always kind of allowed to just be weird. And I used to go on ghost tours in Chicago with Richard Crowe, and I got to investigate. He was a very famous local legend in Chicago. And we got to investigate the Biograph Theater on the night of the anniversary of John Dillinger's death. And when I was a teenager, and I just was like, this is so cool. And I always knew I wanted to do something with the paranormal, maybe someday lead my own tours. And I just never knew what it was. And I went off to college, Winona State, Minnesota. Something paranormal brought me to that radio station, and ended up meeting my friend Tim there. We became buddies, and lo and behold, 20 years later, when he was working in radio still, he reached out and said, hey man, I have an opening on Sunday nights at 11 to midnight. Do you want to do a radio show together? And I said, yeah. He goes, what topic? And I said, let's do the paranormal. We both like the paranormal. Let's do this. And he said, okay. And we launched, and that was 18 years ago. So I've been in paranormal radio now for 18 years of my life, 18 of the best years of my life, I would say. Aside from being a dad, that is my second favorite thing that I've ever been able to do. So is to do radio and the paranormal. So I got to marry those two. And, my parents were great, because this has never made me rich, but it paid my bills. And my parents were just happy that I had something in my life that paid the bills. And I was never meant to be a doctor or a lawyer. I play doctor, and I like to think I could, go to court and fight my way out of a ticket because I've watched CSI and
Yeah.
NYPD Blues and LA Law all my life. So, but yeah, so it just all kind of came together, and there's been these cool little synchronistic paranormal things that just brought me into this world and have held on to me and kept me here.
It's pretty cool. I was
Mhm.
smiling before when you were saying as a kid you would ring up the radio stations and you had that interest. Just as a side note, when I was a little girl, I always watched the Dinah Shore show, which
Sure,
was a talk show, and drive my mother crazy when she went out to go to the store. I'd rearrange the furniture the same way Dinah had her lounge suites so that I
sure.
could pretend interview movie stars, and I would pretend getting an Oscar, and I would pretend signing autographs, and it just made me smile that you did a very similar thing. I never became a movie star or a talk show host, but
Wait, what are you
there
what are
you
you
go.
doing right now? You're
Oh
hosting
well,
a chat show with
now I am
one
with
of the most
famous
celebrated
people. Yeah.
personalities in the paranormal field. If I might say so myself, Golden Telly Award winning international TV sensation Dave Schrader. So it's all coming to fruition for you.
Oh no, who'd have thought? Oh gosh. Look, I was going to ask you too. I had I did see that you said when you were a little boy, 12-year-old, and I know you probably talked about this, but I haven't heard this story. So were you camping or were you with the Boy Scouts, or what happened that you were somewhere where you saw a Bigfoot? And did you see him from a distance or did he walk right in front of you? Like, tell me, just please tell me that story because I'm fascinated. I'd love to see one.
Let me show you on this doll where he touched me. No, it was I wasn't camping. I'm an avid indoorsman. I don't like the out of doors too much. But I was a kid, and my grandparents owned 40 acres in Foley, Alabama, and only about 10 of those acres were livable. The rest was just wild brush and woods and creepy, snaky, alligatory things. So we never really went out that way. But my grandfather tended a pond, and it was filled with fish. We used to fish in the pond all the time. So the big, exciting thing for the day was my cousins and I would go down and fish or hang out or play Planet of the Apes and, run around like goofballs. And one day, my cousin Rob and I were down by the pond fishing, and we could hear something big stomping around. And again, it never really dawned on me that it would be a Bigfoot because Bigfoot wasn't a thing. I mean, it was like 1977, so I was about 10 years old, and obviously Bigfoot had been on In Search of and a few of those things, but he wasn't part of the regular conversation. So I just figured there was something walking around back there, wolf or bear or something. And it kept getting louder. And the pond was maybe 50 yards from one side to the other. And there were these tall bushes at the end of the pond. And all of a sudden we heard the rustling, and this hairy hand came and pushed the top of the bush down. And I could see this thing from about the tip of the nose up. And it looked like a Bigfoot to me. I don't, but it had the kind of dark grayish black mane of hair
Mm.
and was very strange looking. And it just stared at my cousin and I. And your brain at any age, just kind of when you see something that extraordinary, I just kind of froze and looked. And your brain's trying to figure out, what am I looking at? And I remember turning to my cousin, and he was littler than I was, and he looked up at me, and we just kind of looked back at this thing, and it was still standing there staring. And it didn't growl at us, it wasn't threatening, it wasn't, but we just knew we shouldn't be there, and we hightailed it up to the house, half expecting that by the time we got up there, we would find out it was one of our idiot dads dressed in a gorilla suit trying to scare us. When we got in the house, everybody was there. Our dads, our grandfathers, our uncles, our cousins, and we were wound up enough about it that they grabbed their guns and went out looking. But nobody was
Oh,
thinking look for footprints. Nobody was thinking look for hair. I really wish I had access to that property now, just to go back and re-examine it and get full measurements. But it was really a cool moment. Now, again, this is colored through the lens
I see.
of my youth. So there is a chance that I'm misremembering it. And maybe it was, the face was very dark and inset. It could have been perhaps a homeless man that was living in the woods back there and just had a wild, unkempt head of hair and a dark inset face. But it didn't feel human. It felt animal like when I saw it. But again, as a kid trying to perceive this thing that you're seeing, it's hard for me to say. I never got to look at his feet, so I don't know if they were big or small or medium, you know?
Yeah, and at least you're analytical about it. You're not saying it definitely was. You're saying that through the eyes of a child and from your memory, that's what you believe you saw.
Yes.
Sure, there could be another explanation, but I prefer to actually go with your reasoning. I think it would be magical if that was what it was. I always say I hope nobody ever really finds one and captures it or anything like that, because the
I
poor
would
thing.
actually, I hope that we do find one at some point, so that we could prove it, because I think there's something to learn from these beings. Um, like we both know what science would do to it.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I hope that it would be something very public so that there would be no way that they could just squirrel it away. But I think that's already happened. I think they've already uncovered and found a Bigfoot and know what they're dealing with.
You reckon? Could be.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, like you say, that was on your grandparents' property. So someone else owns that property now. You just don't know. If somebody actually shot one, God forbid, but say they did, who are they going to call? The police, I guess, or someone, and then someone comes in, takes the body, whatnot, and it's all shh. We don't want anyone to know
And what
about
if
this.
you find out this thing is humanistic in nature? Are you then up for murder charges? Because I don't know. It's very strange.
It's done. I kind of believe in them. I just yeah. And now that I've talked to you, I kind of believe in them that little bit more. So I'd like to. Harry and the Hendersons was a favourite movie.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, were aliens, but I wondered what your take is on it. I kind of think that UFOs are a definite thing because unexplained or unidentified flying object, we see them all the time. You've seen them. So to say that there's no such thing as UFOs is silly because obviously there are. But aliens, I do believe, but I wonder what you think. Firstly, do you think aliens are real? But second, do you think they're here already, that they don't technically come in from anywhere else? Do you think they're just here and always been?
I'm starting to believe that they've always existed here and that they're in our water, that they're in our oceans. And that, I mean, we know that dolphins were once land mammals that moved to the water for whatever purpose or reason. So it very well could be that these beings felt threatened as well. Maybe it was during an ice age, so they went to the water. Maybe it was during volcanic activity, or they knew that these meteor strikes were coming, these asteroid strikes, so they went down. I don't know how it all works, but I do believe that they've always existed, and I do believe that they've always been there to kind of exist amongst us. There's just too much in the way of ancient proof to me that they've existed.
I feel the same way. I tend to think, I think if they were visiting from out of space, by now someone would have picked up, well, they probably have, but by now even the average Joe with a telescope could have possibly got some really good footage of something coming into the atmosphere. But if they're coming up from the oceans, which are...
we have captured video footage. We have captured amazing footage of showing things coming into our atmosphere and doing this, but it doesn't mean that they're not out, running to Mars for a carton of milk or something. We don't know where they're off to or what they're doing. For an exchange student, they've got to get to work over on Venus,
and I just think too what they say about how they look. that they're grey or green and they're slender, big eyes, little mouth. No. I sort of think, well, if you're living underwater or in a dark place, over time through evolution, you're going to change. So that's probably why they've got big eyes, so that they can see in the dark. I don't know.
Something to consider is dolphins in their fins have phalanges. They have finger bones, right? Very long, extended finger bones. And if you look at a dolphin head on, it's gray with huge black eyes and a slit for a mouth. So you're right. It could be adaptability. They're extremely intelligent creatures. Maybe they were part of that race that almost, in a sense, de-evolved.
Yep.
Or maybe this is their evolution. I don't know. It's fascinating and exciting to consider and talk about, though.
Oh, it is. It is. There's so many different ways you can look at it, but yeah. I had to laugh at where you saw the name of Trout Lake, where you saw your UFOs. I thought, must be lots of trout in it, obviously.
Well, that would be my guess. Yeah, Trout Lake, Washington.
Yeah. Now look. This leads me to, I ask this question every time I speak with a male. I ask a separate one if I talk to a lady.
Okay. It's boxer briefs.
Yeah, the boxer briefs. You knew what was coming, didn't you? So boxer briefs, commando, or I actually learned a new one the other day, apparently the elephant thong. Just thought, okay.
That's not me. Nope.
So which do you prefer, Dave?
Boxer briefs. I like it comfortable. Yeah.
Snug, comfortable, not sweaty, not hanging around.
Very
good. There you go. At least now I know that I could probably buy a huge box of random sorts of boxer briefs and give out plenty of Christmas presents just using those, because just about everyone I've asked, boxer briefs.
Well, I live in Minnesota, so I like the freeness of boxers, but I like the warmth of the boxer brief holding things a little closer. So
there you go. Question answered, guys.
Yeah.
Now, you've written a book, and I am going to wait until I get to Virginia City and see you, because I'm going to get you to sign my copy to your best friend from Australia. But tell us.
Don't tell my friends Ann and Renata that I just nodded when you said that. So
I won't say anything.
They're from Australia and they'll get very bent out of shape.
Oh, nah, they'll be right. Us Aussies are pretty easygoing. Because this is kind of this is late in your career to write a book, but what led you to decide to do this? Like, what made you think?
First of all, why is it late in my career? I'm only 56. I plan on living to 118, so I'm only at the midway point of my life.
Well, I'm older than you, all right? So you're all right. You're still a baby.
I co-wrote a book about 10 years ago called The Other Side, A Guide to Ghost Hunting and the Paranormal. And it was a teens guide to teach them how. And I hate that it says teens guide, because it's really for anybody. And I think it's even good for seasoned paranormal investigators, because it kind of gives some insights into things we lose touch with, things that we did in the beginning that we lost. But I co-wrote that book 10 years ago. I've waited. Part of it is I deal with something called imposter syndrome. So I have a hard time. I've typed and written many books, or the beginnings of many books, and then I don't release them because I get this sense of, well, who's going to want to read this? Why am I putting this out there? And it's just a very self-destructive way to go and thinking. So I had all these stories that I'd written for our Theater of the Mind segments, and some that I'd never released. And I thought, this would be a good time to get those stories out, take them from the script form I'd written them in, recraft them into short stories, and release them, because they're some of my favorite weird supernatural stories. And I just wanted to get them out there and give people a chance to have, I call it good bathroom reading. My original title for the book, I wanted to call it, was Stories to Scare the Beep Out of
Dave.
You. What?
Guys, it's my dogs. I'm going to leave this in, guys. I'm not going to edit this out. This is true reporting in the raw.
Is that a wallaby? What was that? A wallaby?
Where is he? There he is.
Yeah.
A Chihuahua and a Rottweiler. Muffin, the Rottweiler. Muffin, come, sit. Thank you for alerting me the postman came. Sorry, Dave.
No worries.
Sorry, guys. But there you go. Yeah, look, I reckon it's really good that you've done it. I'm certainly looking. I was going to buy it the other day, and I thought, no, I don't want to travel with it to America. I'll wait till I get there, and I'll see you, and I'll get one from you straight up and get you to sign it. So, yeah, because chihuahuas. But yeah, I do find it fascinating. And of course, Janice Oberding, another lovely lady and author. Yeah. So, did she ever give you any handy hints for writing books, or did you not?
I don't like to bother people, so I didn't reach out to any of the authors. Well, I shouldn't say that. I reached out to Richard Estep and Jeff Belanger, two of my buddies that are authors, just to kind of get a little kick in the butt. And give me some direction on what to do with the stories. So once they kind of weighed in, I just went at it, and within about 10 days of really hard focused writing, I had the first book done. I'm well through the second book, hoping to have that out by maybe June this year. I'd like to release all 4 books this year because I've got about 4 books. Yeah, so I'm hoping to get those done, but I'm also in the midst of making them available for digital, for like Kindle, electronic ebooks, and I'm going to be recording.
I was just going to ask
the stories in audiobook form, and then with the audiobook, I'll also add a little bit of flavor. So aside from just the story, I might give you some other background regarding the story or concepts as to what this is or what I believe is going on. So just kind of a fun little extra for the audiobook.
Yeah, and I like audiobooks. I love to read, but sometimes I'm multitasking, so I like to listen to things while I multitask. So that'd be pretty cool. Now, I was watching your podcast yesterday. For those of you who are unsure, Dave does have a podcast, The Paranormal 60. I was watching it yesterday. I was listening to you read some of the listeners' stories, and you might not want to answer this, but sometimes when you get listeners' stories, do you ever think to yourself, oh gosh, did they just get let out of an asylum? Like, sometimes I think, oh my goodness. But having said that, you don't have to answer that. That's just how I think sometimes.
Oh, sure. No, of course. You hear some of the stories, you read some of the stories, and you're thinking, what nutbag wrote this? But then I learned early in my career on radio that, people were always, back in the day, why don't you guys do the live video camera and live streaming? And that was, 12 years ago when people were just starting that. And I thought, well, who wants to look at 2 old bald guys reading stories? I thought it was kind of weird, but people love it. But I'm glad we didn't, because we used to roll our eyes at each other when we'd hear some of these weird stories and stuff. But I started to realize something important, and it stopped me from being dismissive. Just because an experience didn't happen to me does not mean that it didn't happen, and it's not very real to the people that did have the experience. And that, we had some stories that took place where people would write in and say, I like your show. I like the paranormal. I have never had my own experiences except for this one time. And it would be some random, crazy sounding story. And we would share it and just let it live. And we'd go on. And then all of a sudden I'd start getting emails. And it might have been a story that, perfect example. This guy wrote to us about this like 3 to 4 foot tall frog creature that would stay outside of his bedroom door and kind of stand there like a sentinel. And if he tried to approach it, it would kind of yell at him, go back to bed, go away, things like that. Well, it just sounds ridiculous, right? Kermit the Frog with a sore throat yelling at you, and it was so stupid sounding. And I don't mean that to be dismissive, but that was what was going through my head. Oh yeah, you're right. That is terrifying, a giant frog. And it was just so silly, but I just let it be. And then I started getting emails from people around the world that said, Dave, And a couple of them were specific. Dave, I have been suicidal because I thought I was crazy for seeing these frog creatures. And
Oh,
now
wow.
other people have. That makes me feel so much better. I'm not crazy. I'm not mental. I'm not having a breakdown. And all of us, when you start getting letters from people around the world that have had similar experiences, it made me realize I can't sit in judgment. It may sound
Yeah.
crazy to me, but let's face it, there's a lot of things that sound crazy, like the concept of virtual reality glasses. Oh yeah, like we're going to be able to be inside a video game. That's so stupid. You guys are lunatic. We can be, and now here we are.
And now, yep, there.
Yeah,
Actually,
and
yeah, you're right. You've put me back in my place. You're right, because
yeah,
there's so much that goes on in anybody's life that who are we to say it didn't really happen?
right.
And when you get other letters from other people like you've just described, then it's like, oh, okay, I won't, as you say, I won't be so dismissive. It's interesting to me too, because I had an experience. I was in bed. I thought I was awake. I still think I was awake. I had an experience. I got a fright. I saw a dead father-in-law, screamed and said, "Ooh," and but then I dismissed it myself because I thought, was I dreaming? Like, was I
Right.
awake? And you often hear people say, I was in bed, it was late, I heard a noise.
Mhm.
I woke up too and saw someone standing at the end of my bed. While I was in bed, we were all asleep. It often comes around that sleeping time, and that's where I often think, because of my experience, were you really awake? Or were you asleep and dreaming and it just happened to be very vivid? I don't know. What are your thoughts on the dreaming and seeing things type
Well,
thing? I don't know.
oh, science can kind of push a lot of these things away. I had
Mhm.
a dream visitation with my grandfather after he died. Part of me sits back and goes, "Well, Dave, you were destroyed by your grandfather's death. This is
Mm.
part of the grieving process, and you were left with questions and felt like you never got to say goodbye. This was your brain trying to figure that out. However, there were different elements, like the fact that and I still, even having had that experience, still question what did I really experience. However, I came back with information I never knew, and I mentioned it to my mom in passing. I'm like, yeah, so I had a dream about grandpa and this is what happened. And she's like, you do know that's real, right? That did happen, not the dream, but the bit of information that he gave me. And I was like, no, I had no clue. So it's interesting that, in a lot of these facets, we can bring something back from that visitation or from that moment. When I had it, when my grandfather said goodbye to me in the dream, and I started to wake up in bed, when I opened my eyes, I could see his face fade into the darkness. And I was like, oh, this is a dream. And I just, that
And
hypnopompic states where dream and reality kind of blend for a few seconds until my girlfriend rolled over and she goes, go close the closet door. I can smell your grandfather's musty clothes.
oh,
And I looked over and the closet door was closed. When my grandfather passed away, I took some of his favorite
yeah.
smoking jackets and a couple of cool items and I kept them in my closet. And he didn't smell, but it was definitely like the
He
old
had a smell
people,
about him. He
yeah,
had a
that old people clothes smell.
yeah.
And she could smell it. And as he faded away, she rolled over to me and said, go close the closet door. I can smell your grandfather's clothes. So it
Wow.
was something that then became a shared experience. So it's hard to say, but I'm not 100% sure that we're really dealing with discarnate souls. Are these projections from within our own mind? Do we have the capabilities of, during the grieving process, did I release something to have this experience? And because it was a fully fleshed out, realized moment, I emitted a smell, I emitted a sound, I emitted something that was akin to what my grandfather would have been, so that my girlfriend wasn't smelling him, he was smelling the representation of whatever the scent musk was, because we know we put off a musk scent in
We
different
do.
points, in danger and in pain, and your body does release these deals. So if your body is capable of that, how do we know that we're not doing other
Capable of
things?
doing something like that. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
I just think it's fascinating. I think a lot of the paranormal might be time slip phenomena. Um, I think it might be interdimensional, so that the ghosts we think we're encountering are really mirror universes of us having similar experiences, and maybe those bumps in the night you hear is yourself on the other side of that mirror, living a life. It's I just think there's so much to this. We can't pigeonhole and just say this is what this is. This is what that is. I think there are so many different elements to it, and that's what keeps me excited about this field. Is always looking into the possibilities of what else could be there, what else could be a rationale or reasoning. And when science throws me an answer, I like that answer. And I like that it's linked into science, but how can that science also apply to the supernatural? Because you have to remember, magic is now what we call science. Right?
Yeah.
The elixirs that the witches put together, the things that they put together in their pots with their little pestles and mortars are what we now take as aspirin, or we
Yeah.
take, so it's
Or
it's all
yeah.
perspective. And
All about vitamins and things like that. It's all stuff, plant derived things that back in the day you would have been burnt at the stake for even
right.
mixing up in your little
Well,
pot.
you'd have been fine as long as you were helping out from a distance. It's when I suddenly decided that I needed your property and then would point a finger and call you a witch that it became a problem. So,
Yeah.
right, that's the whole thing. So we have such a skewed perspective, and even science today does not get things right. I always liken it to this. I love this little analogy. Like 30, 40 years ago, there was a doctor who was at a giant symposium, and this is real. And he said, I believe that I've broken the code on ulcers. It is a bacteria that we can treat with antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
And he was laughed off stage, laughed out of this deal, this symposium. His career was reduced to ruins. They mocked him, they scoffed at him. 2 years later, it's found out that it truly is a bacteria that can be helped with antibiotics. Did this guy get a redemption? No, he was already done. He was already crushed under the heel of science. But look,
Yeah.
this guy was just ahead of the curve. So maybe not throw things out so quickly because it doesn't fit your paradigm yet, until
Mm.
you can prove to me it's not a bacteria. 100%. Until you can prove to me that these things don't exist, we can't just summarily dismiss it and throw it away because it doesn't fit your paradigm. Listen, a skeptic is just a believer who has yet to have his own experience. There are
Yeah.
many non-religious people that have no belief in it, that suddenly change during a near-death experience when they see the face of God or the light and heaven and heavenly choruses. Suddenly they go from being a non-believer to a believer because they had the experience. To me, that's a very powerful element to this entire experience. Is I like to go on faith. I like to go on the fact that, yes, I believe that you may have had this. I believe that there are people that have mental disturbances
Mhm.
that are hallucinating things. But isn't it interesting that unbeknownst to them, there are 2 million other people that have hallucinated the exact same phenomena?
Mm. And that's the thing. One one thing I used to think in regard to mental illness, and I'm not making light of mental illness. It's quite just terrible, but um, sometimes I've seen stories where people that have murdered families, like
Mhm.
murdered loved ones, where they say, I'd been hearing voices. It was telling me to do it. I don't understand. I loved my family. I loved whatever. And I sometimes think to myself, are you mentally disturbed, or is there something that's actually making you do that, that has a
Or
bit of
both.
fun with you? Or,
Maybe
oh, yeah,
because
or both.
because you are vulnerable, it's easier for them to get to you, because
Yeah, yeah,
they know that they can push you, because doctors are just gonna put it off as though you're sick and
yep,
psychotic, and
yeah,
but in the interim, something turns you and does horrible things. It's
yeah,
impossible to say. There's, a lot of cases of serial killers where people have encountered them and been eyewitness to strange phenomena. In the TV series, The Bundy Tapes, one of
mhm,
the, attorneys goes on to say how there were times, Ted had the bluest, clearest of eyes, but sometimes as he would go into a rage, his entire eyes would turn black.
Yes, and that was a fascinating thing about that particular man, in that even himself in interviews said that at times he honestly he knew it was wrong, but he had no control over it. It was as if something else overtook him, and in no way on this earth am I condoning Mr. Bundy and his actions. I'm just saying that it is interesting that some people, who knows what goes on in our minds and what causes all of this to happen, how it happens, and all that sort of thing, and near-death experience. And being a nurse, I've told my viewers this before, I've been with many people when they've passed away. I've been the one that's there because their family couldn't get there in time or whatnot, held their hands. I've seen varying things. I've seen things where they just are in a coma and don't wake up. They just go. And then I've seen things where they're talking to someone who's in the room and there's no one there. But the minute they start doing that, I know it's soon. So the mind and the energy that's within our bodies, and it is energy, who knows? It's a fascinating. I mean, I could talk about this for hours. I don't have hours, but it's just, to me, everything's fascinating. Like, I'm skeptical of some things, and healthy skepticism, I'd call it. I won't fall for everything, so to speak, but I'm still very open to everything. Like you say, back it up if you can a little bit with more information and all that sort of thing. And I'm, because in my lifetime I've experienced things I can't explain, and still can't explain. But I've not seen a ghost yet, though, Dave. I've not seen a ghost.
Well, I wouldn't turn around right now if I were you, because that might change.
But yeah, I did go, actually, Dave, I did go to Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Have you been there? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, numerous times.
Yeah, and I went down with some friends. There was 4 of us all together. We went down the death chute. Went down to the bottom. Nothing extraordinary happened. It was just very dark, and I got very exhausted walking back up. Nothing terribly interesting had happened. It was fun. It was awesome to be in that place that I've only ever seen on TV. But when I was walking up, I had my handy dandy phone with me, and I thought, I'll just film walking from the bottom of the chute to the top and let people in real time know how long it takes. Halfway up, maybe, I start humming, whatever, and then I shut up because I was out of breath. And a few moments later, not an echo later, like a few moments later, I hear singing. And I thought it was actually my friend Cassie. I thought, oh, she must be singing. And I asked her, I said, oh, you singing? And she went, no. And then I thought, I dismissed it in the moment. Biggest mistake. Dismissed it in the moment. Months later, I decided, I'll have a look at the footage I got. Maybe I did get something. Sure enough, I stopped singing and boom, it's on. So I heard it with my ears and it picked up on the phone. Now, as a skeptic, can I say it was exactly like a singing ghost in the tunnel? No, because although my friend said not me, I thought there might have been that moment of slip where maybe she did, but she forgot she did it. I don't know. But to me, at that time, I was about to go, oh, there's no such thing. Waverley's not even haunted, and then when I listened back to that, I thought, oh, I caught something. And oh my goodness, it was real. What caused it, I still don't know, but I'd love to go back there one day, go back down and sing again. Cool. Because, but that's about it, really. That I had a
similar experience in the death tunnel where I had to go all the way down to the bottom to shut that gate and make sure that none of my attendees were out there. And I was coming up those stairs pretty fast by myself, and I got winded about halfway up, and I stopped. And when I stopped, footsteps continued to come up behind me, and then it stopped behind me. And again, it wasn't just echoes of footfalls. No. It was something running up the stairs behind me. So it was very, oh, what the hell was that? So yeah, kind of a cool deal that you had a similar deal with whistling or humming, singing, and
Humming, yeah,
that same
humming.
deal.
And like when you think about what that tunnel was used for too, it's primarily just transport, like bringing in supply. It was the entrance tunnel for the workers, and yes, they shipped the bodies down that way to the hearses and all that sort of thing. But it was a very busy thoroughfare back in the day. So it doesn't mean that you necessarily like the footsteps coming up behind you, like residual at the time. Who knows? But that's the sort of activity that would have been there, and even somebody singing on their way to work. Who knows? But
Maybe
that's about all.
Maybe the ghost was down there with me when I took off running up the stairs. The ghost thought, "Oh hell, what did he see?" And it was running with me because it was afraid too. I don't know.
That could have been, but yeah, I love that place. It's super exciting. Well, just was awesome being in a building with such history. That's how I saw it. So,
Great, yeah.
but yeah, let's see. I think I've asked you everything, and we've spoken about your book, which I think is very important. So I'll put links to where people can buy that down in my description. I'll put links to everything. All right.
Thank you.
And but just in regard to things that are coming up for you in the next couple of weeks or so, I was going to ask you your podcast, the Paranormal 60. Is that
You're kind of a
Wednesday?
squirrel. You're all over the place with.
Oh, I always am. People are used to me. Yeah, I do this all the time. Don't worry, they're used to me. They love me. The Paranormal 60. That's 2 nights a week, isn't it? Or 2 days a week?
Well, my podcast is a video podcast on here in the United States, Monday night and Wednesday night live.
Yep.
And then if you like to subscribe to Paranormal Podcasts, I have the Paranormal 60 Network. So when you subscribe to my Paranormal 60 audio podcast, there's 5 different shows. There's New England Legends with Jeff Belanger and Ray Auger. There is the Paranormal 60, which is me doing an interview the next day. Wednesday is the Monsters Lounge with Tressa and Jenny. Thursday is the Paranormal 60 News, and Friday is True Hauntings Podcast from Australia. It's Anna and Renata sharing their examples in there. So 5 days worth of paranormal programming. So you can subscribe. It's free. So wherever you listen to podcasts, you can check it out and subscribe for the show.
Oh, cool. Well, I'll definitely put that link in, and I'll do that myself. I didn't realize that. I'm on the YouTube for your channel, but I didn't realize that. So I'm not very good at research, am I?
And if you want to look at this old man face interviewing people, you can go to my YouTube channel, The Paranormal 60, and subscribe. Hit that little bell so that you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. And I talk to experts and real life experiencers from around the world on all facets of the strange and supernatural.
Yeah, really, and sometimes really, really strange. It's pretty cool, actually. I enjoy watching it. And for those interested as well, Dave does. I don't even know when you're ever home, actually, Dave. Dave does plenty of public appearances, events and all that sort of thing. So if you go to his page, if you do all that, he alerts you to what he's doing in upcoming weeks, months, etc., so that you can go and catch him and buy one of his books and get it personally signed by Dave. He's only got one best friend in Australia, so he can't write that on the book.
But the books, I believe, are available over in Australia. I think you can find them on Amazon.
Yeah, they are.
So you can order it directly from Amazon and save shipping. I know I've had people reach out to me from Australia and around the world asking if they can order direct from me, but the shipping and handling is more expensive than the book. So just buy it through Amazon, and hopefully we'll get a chance to meet in the future and I can sign them for you. But the book is called Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, and it's ghosts and monsters and other supernatural scary tales. So I hope people will check it out. Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness.
All right. And there will be a link in the description, guys. And also, for anybody interested, I am having an event in Virginia City, July 12th to 14th, and Dave is coming. So I'm super excited. I'll be able to meet him in person, get my book signed. So if you all are around in that area in those dates, come and see Dave, and Dustin Parry will be there as well, and my lovely friend Janice Oberding, a cast of thousands, not really, but it'll be a great jam-packed weekend, fun things to do, and
Excellent.
Dave will be there. So thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. This has been
Thank you
awesome.
for having me.
Yeah, and I could actually speak to you for hours, maybe another day.
Well, when
I
we see
will.
each other in July, we will speak for
Yes.
hours.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, and goodbye to everybody watching. See you next time. Bye.